It's now my great honor and privilege to introduce to you Rabbi Pinny Allouche from Scottsdale, Arizona. Pinny and I have an unspoken argument that we've had for many years. The unspoken argument is that he thinks he loves Rabbi Steinsaltz more than I do, and I think I love him more than he does. But in any case, I give you Rabbi Allouche.
Thank you, Arthur, for that wonderful introduction. I will tell you that I prefer leaving that argument open, but I will tell you that from Rabbi Steinsaltz's standpoint, there is no argument. I think he loves his students equally. I in fact asked him once if he had any favorite students, as well as if he had any favorite books. And I received two different answers at two different times for those questions. The first answer was, it depends on the day. And the second answer was a question. You know, Jews respond to questions with questions. He said, which finger do you like the most on your hand? So I do believe that that's the case for all of us here, for all of his students. I do want to thank Arthur and of course my dear friends, Rabbi Mechai and Rabbi Meni. It's good to see you. We don't get to see each other so many times, but Shakar for your words, for your teachings. And of course thank also the other society led by Margie and our entire team who have orchestrated and I know worked so hard on this event. It's really an honor and a pleasure to be a part of it. So my theme, as you can tell, is the afterlife, which I probably know just as much as you do. Because if you have met someone who has gone up and come back down to tell us exactly how it works, please introduce me to that person. Maybe my presentation today would be different. But I will tell you that there was once a man who came to his employee and said, Bob, do you believe in afterlife? Bob said, yes, of course I do. The employer tells him, well, you're lucky, Bob, because yesterday, when you said you couldn't come because of your grandmother's funeral, she showed up at work to ask for you. So, so I'm glad you believe in the afterlife. But the question, of course, as posed in the book, is whether Judaism believes in the afterlife. And I will answer simply by saying no. In fact, there is no word for the afterlife in Hebrew. There is no word afterlife in Hebrew. Afterlife is referred by many terms, Olam Haba, or the world to come. But afterlife does not exist, and I believe that that's simply because we don't believe in this notion that life is in this world, and then with death it ends, and there's something that comes after that. No, life is endless. That's why you have many customs such as placing round rocks, right, on tombstones to symbolize this endless cycle of life. Life goes on and on. There is no such thing as before life or after life, because again, we're speaking about infinity. There are, by the way, just to point out, there are many words like that in Hebrew. You know, I'm of the belief, please feel free to disagree with me and make my life miserable if you do, but if there is no word for it, then it's probably a bad idea. There is no word for afterlife because really there's no afterlife. There's no word, for example, for retirement in Hebrew. Because Judaism doesn't believe in retirement. There is no word, my teenagers don't like to listen to this, but there is no word for teenager in Hebrew. There's no transitional stage between childhood and adulthood. You're either a child or you're an adult. There is no word to make things more interesting, and I wish someone could compose a book, maybe that's homework for one of you, of all these words that don't exist in Hebrew and why. But there's no word for tolerance in Hebrew. We don't really believe in tolerance, but that's a discussion for a different time. So regarding afterlife, we don't really believe in this afterlife, but we do believe in the idea that the soul continues to live elsewhere. What happens exactly to the soul is a good question, but I have here a bunch of quotes, a bunch of sources which I'm not sure, you can find it in your pamphlets, which I'm not sure we'll read each and every one of them. Of course, most of them are based on the Soul book and also on other books of Rabbi Steinsaltz, Arthur mentioned a 13-petal rose. There's a whole book, there's a whole chapter there called The Soul. Simple Words is another book of Rabbi Steinsaltz that has a chapter called Death. And there he speaks a lot about this endless life of the soul and the journey after this world. So this is a compilation really of all of these sources, but I will start just by sharing with you a story that I experienced just a few months ago in my own community. I'll never forget that I was called to the Mayo Clinic's hospice by a doctor, as a congregant of mine, and she's a doctor there 3 times a week. And she says, look, there's a Jew here who's dying and he wants to see a rabbi. Do you mind coming? I said, sure. I walked into the hospice. Dr. Etzioni tells me here, Sherwin Bash is the name of this Jew. He was a very successful Hollywood producer responsible for many illustrious careers like Neil Diamond and others. And he wants to see you, please walk in. I walk in, and the first words that come out of his mouth was, Rabbi, I haven't seen any rabbis since my bar mitzvah. So I asked him, half jokingly and half not, in America you find rabbis like you find flies. So why now? You've probably avoided us for a good long time. He was 87 years old. Why now? And he told me, Rabbi, I don't know, but something in me tells me that I need a rabbi before I die. So we put on tefillin, we said the Shema, we said the Vidui, and after that he was sobbing. And he told me, Rabbi, I don't think I've avoided rabbis for so long. What I have avoided is my soul. And I'm so glad to have discovered it as I move on to the next world. The next day he died. But I know that this was a man who taught me and many others a lesson, that indeed we have to pay attention to that soul. Not so much to know where we are going to, but also to know how we are to live. You know, in the book Simple Words, Rabbi Steinsaltz mentions this Hasidic proverb that says that one who is anxious about living will not be anxious about dying. In other words, if you are cognizant that your life here is a soulful life, is a life therefore with a responsibility that was given to you by God, then when time comes, you'll look back and say, well, I did what I needed to do. My mission, I think, is complete. I can go on moving, I can move on to the next world. But of course, if you weren't anxious about living, then when time will come, you'll say, gosh, where has my life gone? And then you'll be anxious about dying. So I think that's why really it is important to focus really on what Judaism has to say on the afterlife. And I will tell you this, that Rabbi Steinsaltz himself told me that to him it's a pity that they don't teach this in schools. You know, unfortunately, of course, many other religions teach about the afterlife in their schools from a very young age. Judaism doesn't. And Rabbi Steinsaltz was really bemoaning this fact. Therefore, in Scottsdale, I teach part-time at the Reformed Jewish Day School, Pardes, and I teach about the afterlife to the astonishment of many parents. But I think it's very important, as Rabbi Steinsaltz taught us all, and therefore I think it's important to delve a little bit into these texts. So, the afterlife really begins, I'll jump, I don't know, again, these are the sources that for you, really just to give you a taste, for you to explore further. But I'll jump right into the separation of the soul from the body. We'll jump to source here, number 4. And that begins with really a line from the book, The Soul by Rabbi Steinsaltz. I hope you each have these references. So, reference number 4, again from the book, The Soul. Death severes the connection between body and soul. When the body dies, the soul leaves it. Now think of the body and the soul really as a marriage. And therefore, when the soul leaves the body, it's almost like a divorce. And therefore, I think the Zohar says, nothing is hard for the soul as its separation from the body. And therefore, you have many descriptions of the Zohar that speak of how hard it is really for the soul to separate itself from the body. In fact, during Shiva, we are told that for the first 3 days at least, the soul continues to be in the home, and therefore we have to be even more careful about the way we behave, the way we speak. We don't want to speak negatively about the soul because the soul is there. There are many other customs that we have to follow because we really believe that the soul suffers so much from the separation that it doesn't want to leave. And it continues to hover upon the grave, hover upon the home, or hover upon its relatives. And therefore, again, the Zohar says here, observe that when a man is on his deathbed, and at the point of departing from the other world, 3 messengers are sent to him, and he sees what other men cannot see in this world. That day is a day of heavenly judgment, on which the king demands back his deposit. I will say, quote another Mishnah, against a person's will. Al kochacha tamet, in the words of the Mishnah. Happy is the man who can restore the deposit just as it was given to him. Now, it's hard. Now, this creates yet another challenge for the soul, because all in all, there are 3 stages of the journey of the soul after it departs the body. Stage number 1 is what is called Olam HaDimyon, or in English, the world of imagination. Rabbi Steinsaltz speaks a lot about it in the simple words, actually, also he hints to it in the book The Soul. But there, the soul in that world of imagination still imagines that it's in a body. Again, it was married to a body for so long, so it's hard for it to now just see itself as a separate entity. And therefore, the more a person was immersed in this world, the more a person will have to almost feel this world of imagination. If a person was immersed in eating good food, then it will continue to think that it's eating good food. If it was immersed in playing soccer and that was their life, then it will continue to imagine as if they're playing soccer. Yes, the least a person, the less a person was connected to this world, the easier it will be to transition from this world of imagination, because really this world, this bodily aspect of this world, did not speak too much to the soul. Now, that's Olam HaDimyon. Rabbi Steinsaltz actually uses the beautiful analogy of from the world of medicine, of phantom pains, right? That sometimes a person's leg or arm is amputated, yet that arm still itches, but it's no longer there. Why does it itch? Because the body was so used to having an arm that it still thinks it has an arm, and therefore it itches, even though it's not there. Same with the soul in that world of imagination. It still thinks it has a body, and therefore it thinks of itself as if it's still in a body, yet the body is not there. That's stage number 1. Stage number 2, different levels, and I'm not going to go too much, as I said, into the sources. Stage number 2 is where a person goes to kafakela, or the hollow of a sling. The Rabbi Steinsaltz speaks a lot about this in the book of the soul. But what is that stage? That stage is where a person sees his entire life, from A to Z. Now, what's interesting, by the way, is that if a person did wrong in this world, yet did teshuvah, I don't like the word repentance, that's another word that doesn't exist in Hebrew. The word teshuvah means return. If he returned to his true self, if he did teshuvah, but if you think about this, some of the most important words of the high holidays are so mistranslated that you miss the point of the high holidays. Teshuvah is one of them. But it doesn't mean repentance, it's a very Catholic term. It means to return. Tefillah is another one, right? You say teshuvah, tefillah, tzedakah, not to deviate too much, but tefillah means, it's translated as prayer. Tefillah really means connection. And tzedakah doesn't mean charity, it means justice. You're doing that which is just, that which you should do, not that which you can do. And anyway, but when a person does teshuvah in this world, then those wrongs are erased from that record. And when a person sees his life from that kafakela stage, if a person did real teshuvah, then those evil doings are not shown. Now, what's the purpose of a person watching the movie of his life? The purpose is simply in order to cleanse the soul. See, it's not to punish you. But when a person sees his life from a divine perspective, then when he does wrong, he says to himself, gosh, I should have known better. Why did I do this? This shame, this pain that is brought upon the soul upon seeing those wrongs, cleanses the soul. And it enables the soul really to mature then to the next level. It almost like it's like bleach on the stains of the soul. I think we've all had this experience in school. I've had it probably more than you. But in school, you might remember this, when we were young, we would write an exam, and then the teacher would give us back the exam, and we would go over the answers, and we would find out, oh gosh, I got this answer wrong, and we said to ourselves, what, I wrote this? I knew the right answer. Why did I right? The wrong answer here. And it pains you because now you're looking at it again from that, that perspective which is wholesome. So same here, and that's really the purpose of us watching this movie of our life. Now again, if you don't have any wrongs in your life, you won't spend too much time in that stage. Then you'll move on to the third stage of this journey of the soul after this world. What's the third stage? The third stage is where a person experiences Gan Eden, or paradise. What is paradise? Paradise, of course, is not a world where you have physical pleasures, because it's the world of the souls. It's abstract. So you experience soulful pleasures. In this world, we have soulful pleasures, perhaps not as powerful and as intense as the soulful pleasures in the world to come. But I think music, for example, is a soulful pleasure, depending, of course, which music you listen to. I don't know if reggae music could be counted as soulful pleasures. Other types, Metallica, maybe. But you have soulful pleasures, all good news. I think nachas, for example, right, that word that describes the pride, the satisfaction we receive from our children, that's certainly a soulful pleasure. Now, in the world to come, in Gan Eden, we have these soulful pleasures that derive really, that are derived from God Himself. Now, therefore, we also study Torah in the world to come. That, in a way, is a soulful pleasure that comes to not only nurture the soul, but also to give it much pleasure. So you have these pleasures of the soul in Gan Eden. Now, because God is infinite, those pleasures are also infinite. And you can also gradually ascend to deeper and higher pleasures. That's why when a person has a yard site, it's one of the reasons we say that that person, the neshama that you are commemorating, should have an aliyah, should have a proper ascent in Gan Eden, in paradise. Why? Because we are referring to that ascent in the ladders of pleasures, of soulful pleasures that exist in the Garden of Eden. That's the third stage. Now, there is a fourth stage that Judaism believes in, at least in the perspective of the Kabbalists, primarily the Arizal, Rabbi Yitzchak Luria, and that's the stage of reincarnation. We do believe that souls are reincarnated for multiple purposes. Purpose number one is so that it can fulfill its full mission here in this world. Sometimes you come and you fulfill just half of your mission, or 3/4 of your mission, whatever it is. So you're sent again to fulfill the rest of your mission. Purpose number two is to rectify that which you've done wrong. Sometimes some of these stains that we spoke about are so strong that watching a movie of your life and applying that type of bleach on the stains is not good enough. So you have to come back to correct those wrongs. I'll tell you this, and that's one of the references. It's, I think, the very last reference, but I have a custom, and I'm saying this just because it was the recommendation of Rabbi Steinsaltz. I'll never forget that a few years ago, Rabbi Steinsaltz told me that the way you go to sleep at night is the way you wake up in the morning. And that's the analogy he used. He said, if you go to sleep like a dog, you wake up like a dog. If you go to sleep like a lion, you wake up like a lion. And therefore he suggested that before you go to sleep, do something that will make you go to sleep in a good mood. And since then I've been reading letters of the Lubavitcher Rebbe of blessed memory just before I go to sleep at night. By the way, it's no secret that psychologists today agree with that notion, but one of the big things I try to teach my children, my students, is that certainly electronics should be stopped at least an hour before going to sleep. Many negative effects, and I'm sure the doctors in this room can tell you more about that. But it's tied to this simple yet very wise suggestion of Rabbi Steinsaltz. The way you go to sleep is the way you wake up in the morning. In any case, I've been reading letters of the Lubavitcher Rebbe now for a few years. There's tens and thousands of them. And I stumbled upon this letter not too long ago, which was astounding to me, because the Lubavitcher Rebbe, in a way, was a very pragmatic man. He didn't quite speak about reincarnations. But here, there is a letter here, reference number 20, which speaks of this idea of reincarnation in a letter to a person, of course, who remains unnamed, that was apparently complaining about his shlom bayit, his harmony in his marriage. And this is what the Lubavitcher Rebbe responds to him. you are telling me that you are giving the proper amount of tzedakah, however, your shalom bayit situation, harmony in marriage, needs great improvement. The fact that you're having great difficulties in this area is a sign that this mitzvah has not been completed in your previous life. And he continues to teach. The Holy Arizal teaches us that most souls living in a body have been there before. The reason they come again is to fulfill those mitzvot that they did not do properly the first time around. Those mitzvot that they did not complete in the previous lifetime do not require any more refinement, and therefore their observance is easy. However, those mitzvot that one did not complete in a previous lifetime are the ones most difficult to do. The negative inclination targets these non-completed mitzvot as the ones to oppose most. By the way, this again gives us an idea. If you have a mitzvah that's difficult for you to do, I'm not saying that this is 100% right, but based on this letter, this might be because in the previous reincarnation you had a tough time with that mitzvah, as is implied by the words of the Lubavitcher Rebbe. And then he concludes, the fact that the issue of shalom bayit, harmony in marriage, is so difficult for you, proves that it is a mitzvah which needs fulfillment. In your past lifetime, you did not refine this mitzvah. Now is your opportunity. So instead of complaining about it, do something about it and rectify your soul. Now that's the fourth stage. We do believe that most souls are reincarnations. The Arizal writes that. And again, I'm no big maven in reincarnations. If you are interested in the subject, you can read, of course, The Soul, that speaks a little bit about this, but Shara Gilgulim of the Arizal, The Gate of Reincarnation, speaks a lot about this. I haven't understood a word of that book yet, even though I've tried to read it multiple times. But we do believe, as mentioned, that most of us are reincarnations, and I think a good indication of what we were sent here to do is guided by this big idea that those mitzvot that are difficult for us to accomplish are perhaps the mitzvot that we do need to accomplish in this world, and therefore they are difficult because God is not going to give us just a carte blanche or a pass on these mitzvot. I do want to conclude my remarks by quoting Rabbi Hillel of Parich, the Paricher, as they used to call him. He was a student of the author of the Tanya, of Rabbi Shneur Zalman of Liadi, and even though he had never met him, and then he became a student of the second Lubavitcher Rebbe, Dov Ber of Mesrich, and then the third Lubavitcher Rebbe, Tzemach Tzedek, a pious man who's known for many quotes. He's quoted a lot. One of his quotes is, he has many, but one of his quotes is that the chassid, every chassid needs a mentor that is a chassid. Everyone needs a mentor that understands you, that really feels your pain. I think Rabbi Steinsaltz is that mentor, at least to me and to every one of us. But Rabbi Hillel of Parich, when speaking about the soul, would tell the analogy of a person who found himself in this island, and he heard this tune that he simply fell in love with. Once he left this island, he forgot this tune, and he traversed the whole world to find this tune again, because this tune ignited something in him that nothing else was able to ignite. And he searched everywhere. He ate in the best restaurants, went to the best operas, went to the best cultures and religions in the world, and he couldn't find that tune. Finally, he decided to go back to that island. He went back to that island and he basked in that tune once again, but this time he decided to mark every note so that he can teach this tune to the entire world once he leaves this island. Hillel of Parich would say that this is the story of the soul. There in heaven, we hear God's tunes and we fall in love with them. There's nothing more pleasurable for the soul than those tunes. Then we come down here and we forget this tune. Maybe this is a hint to the Talmudic story where, an angel comes to the womb of the mother to teach the child the entire Torah, but when the child emerges from the womb, the angel slaps his face or her face, and they forget that tune, forget the Torah. But our whole life, Rabbi Hillel of Parich, is really represented by this idea that we're searching for this tune. So we try all sorts of things, but we still can't find this tune. Yet if we were wise enough, we would just look inward and pay attention to the soul, as Amachai said before, and then we'll fall in love with that tune that we will rediscover once again. And once we fall in love with that tune, as Rabbi Hillel of Parich told in that analogy, then it's our duty to mark it down so that we can teach the whole world how to sing this tune. Thank you very much. Yeah, so I'm going to take some questions if there are.